بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, my dearest sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, what we're going to speak about today is regarding the mourning period, and this is something that relates particularly to women. Okay, so there's some particular rulings we need to be aware of. A lot of sisters are not aware of these rulings. It's very important we understand about them. So first of all, when we're speaking about the mourning period in Islam, it's a time where, it's defined, the meaning that it's defined in the religion is it's for the woman to refrain from doing anything that might lead to her getting married. So the mourning period is a time in which a woman refrains from doing certain things in order to avoid, attracting attention to herself. It's out of also honoring the husband, honoring the sanctity of the marriage contract. And so she should avoid doing anything that could lead also to marriage. And so we're going to talk about some of the things we need to avoid in this mourning period. Now, just to mention here that the mourning was something that was well known in the Jahiliyyah. Before Islam, they used to, a woman would mourn for her husband. But the difference is, as mentioned by Zainab bint Abi Salama, the difference is that what they used to do, as mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, that a woman, when her husband passed away, would enter a small house, and she would wear the worst of clothes, and she wouldn't wash or clean herself the whole time, and just food and drink would be brought to her. Okay, so she'd stay there for a whole year. That's the way she would mourn. And so obviously, can you imagine the smell as well? SubhanAllah, that was the way that they would do that mourning. And that in some cultures, like with the Hindus, it's even highly recommended that a woman, may Allah protect us, burns herself to death after her husband passes away. Yeah, that they should throw them, isn't it? They should throw themselves in a fire. That's like the highest, honor that she's reached, that she did that for her husband. Islam made the iddah, okay, the mourning, the waiting period and the mourning for the woman to be only 4 months and 10 days. 4 months and 10 days. Now, we're going to talk about this in more detail, but for the woman who's pregnant, if her husband passes away, her waiting period is only until she gives birth. All right, so once she gives birth, that's it. Her waiting period's over. So to mention here, it's very important to mention here that the mourning period for the woman, for her husband, is actually a wajib. It's actually an obligation. And if she doesn't do it, it's actually a sin for her not to do that. All right? Now, Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 234, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا. Right? So those of you who, how can I say to you? Those of you who, that you pass away and you leave behind you, wives, then they have to wait. They do a waiting period for themselves. They do a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. This is the ayah that shows us that a woman, once her husband passes away, her waiting period is 4 months and 10 days. And previously it used to be a year. There's another ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah which was abrogated, that it used to be for a whole year, this waiting period. Okay, so just to mention, like I said to you, so during this time, which I said is wajib for her to observe, she's not allowed to adorn herself in any way. And I'm going to speak about that in a minute, but I just want to also speak about what is the hikmah behind observing this mourning period. What is the wisdom behind it? So there's a number of reasons that's been mentioned for why the woman observes this mourning period. Part of it is obviously like the same thing when you do the iddah for at-talaq, the iddah for divorce, that it's to show that, to make sure that the womb is free of pregnancy. But I mean, there are some cases where a woman might have to only observe an iddah of one menstrual cycle. So, I mean, to find out whether the womb is free of pregnancy can be done without doing the 4 months and 10 days. So the more correct opinion, one of them is mentioned by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He said that the iddah of wafa, like the iddah of when someone, like her husband's passed away, is out of honouring and sanctifying the end of the marriage and taking care of the right of the husband. All right, so it's out of, sanctifying that contract that has a status and value. And also, like having the blessing of a husband, that's one thing. But you see, there's something else I have to mention here. Even if a woman, I'm going to come and talk about that, even if a woman only had done her marriage contract, she hasn't even consummated with her husband yet, she still has to do this iddah. She still has to do this mourning period. So it's also an act of ibadah. It's also an act of ibadah. Allah's asking us to do this. So obviously you're not going to have much commitment to a husband that you haven't even lived with him yet. You haven't even been alone with him. Do you know what I'm trying to say? But still you have to do this. You still have to observe this waiting period. Okay, so that shows you it's not just about sanctifying the marriage contract. It's also about, it's an act of ibadah that Allah's asked us to do. And also, besides that, if you think about it, there's a lot of wisdoms behind it because it's a time of reflection and a time to be quiet in your life. All right? And subhanAllah, if you think about a woman's emotional needs, there's a great deal of wisdom in it because it makes you realize you have to calm down, reflect on your life. And women have got very different makeup than men. Okay. So this is in relation to the iddah, the hikmah behind why we do this mourning. Now, Ibn Qudama rahimahullah, he's from the Hanbali scholars. He says, what is this? Yani he defines it. It consists of abstinence from finery, perfume, gohl applied to the eyes, as well as from wearing garments that are dyed to create a beautiful impression. And I'm going to go through each of these, right? So this is based on the statement of the words of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he says, لا يحل لامرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر أن تحد على ميت فوق ثلاث ليال إلا على الزوج أربعة أشهر وعشرة. So it's not allowed for a woman who believes in Allah and the last day to do a mourning over anyone for more than 3 days or 3 nights, like altogether, except for her husband, which is 4 months and 10 days. So what this shows is that from the rahmah of Allah, He has allowed for a woman, if her father passes away, her mother passes away, her son, besides the husband, or anyone that she loved, she's allowed to also do this mourning, which which we're going to see how is that done. But this is not allowed for a man. This is a concession for women. Okay, so if you don't have to do this for anyone other than the husband, but you can choose to do it, where you don't wear adorned clothes for 3 days, you don't wear perfume, you don't put makeup on, as we're going to see. So you can do this because you want to show your mourning in your action. Do you understand? But for the husband, it's wajib. Okay? So like I said, it's not allowed for the man to do this. And this is not for men at all. At all. Not even for 3 days. Okay? But of course, you can cry for more than 3 days, right? A lot of people think you can only cry for 3 days and somehow you're supposed to emotionally turn off your emotions and you can't cry anymore. No, it doesn't mean that. It's talking about the actual act of mourning. Okay? That's a lot of people did not understand this hadith. Okay. So we'll go through these different things that we need to observe. Okay, so number one, we'll put these two together. So there's the adornment of the body and the adornment of the dress. Okay, so how is that? So let's talk about some other things. We're talking about adorning the body. For example, she cannot use henna. She cannot put henna on her hands. She cannot dye her hair. She's not allowed to do anything that like beautifies or adorns the body in any way. Like, of course, you can do your sunnah fitriya where, remove the sunnah hair that you remove, right? You're allowed to do that. But we're talking about like dyeing your hair, any type of beautification. So, and this is based on a hadith of Salama, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the woman whose husband has died should not wear clothes dyed with saffron or red dye, nor jewelry, nor apply henna to their hair, nor apply kohl. That's a sahih hadith in Abu Dawood. So that's the first thing. So when it comes to even perming your hair, you shouldn't do any of that stuff. You wouldn't go get your hair straightened. You wouldn't do any of that stuff. You could trim it just for a need, but in general, you don't go get a haircut. You don't do a proper haircut. A special stylish haircut. That's what I'm trying to say. You just trim the necessary what you have to do. But do you understand? You're not supposed to do beautification. Do you understand, sisters? So it's talking about using dyes, anything like that. No. All right. Number two. So that's the first thing. Then number two, the adornment. Also, like for example, like kohl, right? So she shouldn't wear eyeliner, and to demonstrate this, and that's mentioned in the previous hadith which I just mentioned, but also besides that, it was read in Al-Bukhari and Muslim in a hadith of Salama that a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, verily my daughter's husband has died and she has a sickness in her eye, so may she apply kohl. And so he said no 2 or 3 times. All right? But in another narration of Salama, that she placed some kohl in her eye, after Abu Salama had passed away. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what is this, Salama? So she said, it's a dye that isn't for adorning. And so he told her that it adorns the face, like kohl, it adorns the face. So put it on at night, but wipe it off during the day. And that's for medicinal purposes. Only for medicinal purposes. Like these days we have eye drops and stuff, things like that. But they used to use kohl, for only if you had to use it for medicinal purposes, then it'll be okay. All right? So what we can see here is that eyeliner would only be allowed in a case of necessity, but not all the time, and only at night as well, if you had to do it. Now, included in that, obviously, is any type of makeup. Any type of makeup, powder, blush, mascara, lipstick, lip gloss, you get the idea. Okay? It just all goes together. Okay, so that's talking about the adornment of the body. Okay, now we come to the adornment of the dress. She needs to abstain from anything that comes under adorning the dress. So she shouldn't wear anything that's like dyed. Now what I mean by that is obviously most of our clothing is dyed, right? So what I'm talking about here is it should be plain clothing, and that's according to al-urf, which means the customs. What would you normally think is a plain looking dress? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Look, whatever is considered to be a plain looking dress, that's what you can wear. But not like wearing colours like yellow, red. Like generally when we see red and yellow, it's normally like a zina. It's normally like adornment for the woman. Or pink. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So you need to stick to the very like humble colours, you could say. All right? So that's another point. Then the other thing is that she needs to refrain from using perfume. Now, when we say that, it means, of course, you don't not put any deodorant on, okay? Because we have to explain this. But what it means is, you use like obviously low scent. You don't go put on something that's got a strong odor. And it's very similar, like I'll come and talk about that, but it's very similar to when you go to Hajj or Umrah. When you're in Ihram, you shouldn't be using those perfumes. You can't use perfume when you go in Ihram, right? So if you can think about where you're going to use a low scent type of deodorant, that will be okay, inshallah. And there is actually a narration that in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions that she doesn't apply perfume. Like she doesn't apply perfume. That's in Sahih Al-Bukhari and Muslim, so that's what we know. However, there is an exception to, you know, for example, when a woman needs to purify herself after having menses, for example, like they used to use, for example, a bit of misk, or they used to use like a light scented, I shouldn't say misk because misk would probably be too strong, but like they had a light scented type of incense. It's called al-qust. Okay, and this is got healing properties, like it's got like anesthetic type of properties. So this would be allowed as a, what do you call that? An exception, because, you know, you need to get rid of that bad smell. You know what I mean? So what we can, in this time, how do we work that out? Like, you can use shampoos or soaps that, for example, made of almonds. Similar to the types of shampoo and the shampoos and the soaps you can use when you're in ihram. When you're in ihram, you can't use any soap or, you know, shampoo that has any type of flowery, floral scents. Okay, so you have to avoid that when you're in this period of mourning. Okay, but you could use, like I said, an almond meal soap, no problem. All right, because every soap's got a type of scent, so we've got to define what kind of scent we're talking about. All right. So you get the idea, and you'd be careful also. I just thought about another thing, like when you wash your clothes, you wouldn't want to put the strong, because if you're going to wear them, okay, like the fabric softener that's going to be in your clothes, because you're not supposed to put perfume on when you're in your mourning, okay? But just to mention something here, it's all right for you to put incense in your house. Like, you don't have to, just because you're doing that with your body and all that, there's nothing wrong with you putting on nice, to make your house nice. You know, there's nothing wrong with you putting nice curtains, putting on like nice incense in your house. Like, do you understand? You can make your house nice. You don't have to feel like totally depressed in your house or anything like that, okay? It's just about your own self, not to do these things. Okay, then the other thing, the fourth thing is, it's not allowed for her to wear jewelry. Okay, she's not allowed to wear jewelry. And actually, Ibn al-Mundhir mentioned there's an ijma' on this. There's a consensus of the scholars. It's not allowed for her to wear jewelry, and that's due to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith of Salama that mentions no jewelry. Because jewelry, why? Because that's from the obvious adornment of the woman, and so therefore she's to refrain from doing that when she's in her mourning. Okay, so if she was wearing jewelry when her husband passes away, then what she needs to do, just say she's wearing earrings or she's wearing bracelets or ring, anything, she takes it off. SubhanAllah, she takes it off. Yeah, SubhanAllah. It doesn't matter. This is, as I said, you're doing this for Allah. Okay, so you don't worry about people see you or not. And people might see you, because I'm going to talk about that. You might have to go out of your house and do things. A lot of people think you have to stay. No, sometimes you have to go out. Okay? So this is the ruling, and whether you're by yourself or you're with other people, this is how you're going to be. You don't go to even sleep with beautiful pajamas. You wear plain clothes. Do you understand? This is how you are. Like, you're observing. This is an observance that you're doing. Pardon? Yeah, it's not just about people. This is a state. Like, you can't just go to bed like everyone goes and you go put on this beautiful perfume at night. No. Do you understand? No. Okay. Now, also from what is binding upon the woman after her husband dies, and I'm going to talk about this a bit more, but so she needs to stay in the house in which her husband, like her husband's house, like whatever house she was in with her husband when he passed away, then she needs to stay in that house. And even, you know, she should, if she heard the news her husband passed away, she should go back and stay in her house. She should go back and stay in her house and observe her iddah in her husband's house. There was a woman, her name was Fari'a bint Malik. When her husband was killed, she went to the Prophet ﷺ and she told him that her husband had been killed, but he hadn't left any house that he owns nor any money. So she asked permission to return to her family and observe her iddah with her family. So the Prophet ﷺ, initially he gave her permission, but then when she started to walk away, he said, "What did you say?" Like, he asked her to come back. And then he said, "Remain in your house until you reach until the appointed time is completed." So she observed her 4 months and 10 days. And after that, Uthman ibn Affan, he used to even send to ask about that, because to get the knowledge of that, about what is the ruling for the woman in such a case. Okay, so she was like a resource that the Sahaba used to use after the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the ulama gave this hadith as a proof that the woman in mourning must remain in the house of her husband as long as that is possible. Okay, so this is what you need to do, as long as it's obviously possible, as long as that house is owned by the husband, or even if it was rented by him and she's able to pay the rent, she should stay in that house. And the community, like her family should help her to stay there, the community, whatever, because that's where she's supposed to stay. All right? Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the things that, also relate to this. So let's talk about some of the things we also need to look at when it comes to what we can't do when we're in the state of mourning. One thing is, it's definitely not allowed to do a marriage contract. And you might think, oh, anybody would know that. Trust me, there's been some women who were even in their iddah from their husband, which was a revocable divorce, as in he can take her back, and she still went and did a marriage contract with someone else. She hasn't even finished her iddah from her husband that can still take her back. You know, normally if you, you know what I'm trying to say, like you're in the divorce period and you're supposed to be living together, but these days a lot of women just go off and live with their family instead of staying with their husband, and that's called a revocable divorce. Like he can take her back any time during that waiting period, but some of them go and do marriage contracts. Like it's totally haram. You can't, it's not even a valid contract. Okay? But the point is, when a woman is in her state of mourning, she's not allowed to get married. She cannot contract a marriage with anyone during this time. And not even engagement. Not even engagement. Okay, but the only thing that is allowed is just in the case of a woman who she's in her mourning for her husband passing away, a man can subtly imply that he's interested in her for when the mourning period's over. But he's not allowed to say it explicitly. But I mean, he can give her a hint that he might be, he might be interested. Okay? So Allah Ta'ala in the Quran, He says, وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا عَرَضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطَبَةِ النِّسَاءِ. No harm on you for what you make subtly aware that you'd be interested in maybe marrying her after she's finished her iddah. Not for every iddah, for this iddah of mourning. Okay, so we saw that, but definitely no way can she get married or get engaged. He can't ask her, would you marry me? And she says yes, but we have to wait. No, that's haram. Okay? Okay, now let's talk about going out of the house, because this is something that we need to understand. So in general, she needs to stick to her house. During the iddah period for al-wafah, she needs to be sticking to her house. She shouldn't go out unnecessarily. All right? But when I say that, so she needs to go to the doctor. She can go to the doctor. She needs to go to the hospital. It doesn't have to be a compelling necessity. It's not like a life or death necessity that you need to go out. No, it's just your needs. All right? You need to go out. There's no one to bring you food. You go out. There's no one to, you need to pay the rent. There's no one to pay the rent. You need to go out. You've got a job. You need to go to it. You go to the job. Yep. Because actually there's a mention that there was a case in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was actually Jabir bin Abdullah. He said that his auntie, she was irrevocably divorced, and then she went out. She went out to her date palms to work, to make a living. And one man saw her and told her, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in your iddah, go back in your house. And so she said, she needed to do that because she needs to earn a living. So they asked the Prophet ﷺ about that, and the Prophet ﷺ told her, go. He told her, go out and do what what's the word? Work with your date palms, and then because perhaps you may be able to do sadaqah from that, or do something with that income. So he allowed her because she's got a need. She needs to support herself. So that's why, people can't tell you don't do this and don't do that. Who's there? Okay, you don't want to do that. Come and spend on my house then. You don't want me to go to my job. You don't want me to go to the shops. Where are you bringing the food to my door? Where are you paying my rent? If we have enough support, fine. We'll be happy to stay in our house. But if we don't have that, this hadith is a proof that you don't, if you need to go out, you're allowed to because you need to if you go around for your needs. But you still got to observe the other things I told you about the way you dress and all those things. Okay? So that's how we can understand. And another thing I want to mention here as well. Because you get this, so a woman, if she can go, even if she needs comfort, because I get often asked this question. Just say she wants to go to her family's house or another sister's house because she's very depressed or something like that. She's allowed to go and talk with her sisters, of course, in a certain, not with, there should be no men there or something like that, but you know what I mean? To get comfort and, talk to her family, for example, as long as there's no, non-mahrams there. She shouldn't be exposed to non-mahrams because we said the whole idea is to keep quiet, right? Okay, so it's allowed for her to do that, but she must come and spend the night at home. And how we know this is because there were some of the women who their husbands had passed away, and this is mentioned by Mujahid. He's one of the tabi'een. The hadith is in An-Nasa'i wa Abu Dawood, where some of the men were martyred in the Battle of Uhud. And so some of the women came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said to him, Ya Rasulullah, we feel lonely at night. And so what we do is, they said, can we stay with each other to keep each other company? Because all of our husbands have passed away, So then the Prophet ﷺ told them, speak with each other until you feel tired. But when one of you wants to go to sleep, you go back to your home and you sleep the night in your house. Okay, so that's what we know how to do. But in general, the woman, she shouldn't be, the morning woman should not be outside at night or something like that. You understand? It's not right to be out. You need to go out in the day, fine, you've got some needs you need to fulfill. But at night, this should be in your home. But like I said, just say you need to comfort or something like that, then there's nothing wrong with you, going and talking, getting some comfort with someone. Because we sometimes go to extremes with these things. The poor woman, she's already lost her husband, and then everyone just makes it even worse and harder. Can we just, sorry, if you don't mind, I'm really sorry. It's just I'm really worried about not finishing everything. Okay, so you get the idea that she needs to spend the night in her home. She shouldn't go off and stay anywhere else, which is what we find a lot of people doing these things. The other thing is, she's not entitled to be spent on after that. Once the husband's passed away, she's not actually entitled to be spent on. But usually, once the husband's passed away, the relatives, because she needs to stay in the house, so they allow her to, to stay in the house. Depends on everyone's situation is different. Like nafaqah. When you're married, your husband's supposed to spend on you from his income. But once he passes away, you're not entitled to just to take from his spending. You're not supposed to take from his spending. You know what I mean? But you obviously get inheritance. You get inheritance. So that's why another reason why the woman's allowed to go out. She's allowed to go out to earn her income if she needs, because who's going to pay for the rent? You know what I mean? Unless you've got people some people, mashallah, got a house, they've got a family that can support them and those things. Okay. Now, just to mention here, how do you count your iddah as far as the months? Because now look, that's the difference between the iddah for al-wafah in relation to the iddah for at-talaq. Like a talaq, you do it, if you've got menstruation, you count by menstrual cycles, but With this one, with this iddah, it's got nothing to do with menstrual cycles. It's only got to do with 4 months and 10 days. So if the husband died at the beginning of a lunar month, because we count by lunar months, right? Then what we do, and the month is 21, just so that month happened to be 29 days, that's considered as a month in that case. But if he died in the middle of the month, say it was the 15th of Shaban, for example, she counts it as 30 days. So she counts 30 days, 15th of Shaban to 15th of Ramadan, like that. She counts like that until she counts the full 4 months and 10 days. Now, if she was pregnant and her husband passed away, just scared that someone's coming up the door, then, like I told you, her iddah is only until she gives birth. And even if that was 1 hour later, that's her iddah. Even some scholars said, even if she gave birth while he was still in the washroom, that's the end of her iddah in that case. And that the proof for that is Allah Ta'ala says, وَأُولَاتُ الْأَحْمَالِ أَجَلُهُنَّ أَن يَضَعْنَ حَمْلَهُنَّ. Okay, those who have pregnancies, their time is until they give birth to their baby. Now, an important thing to talk about here is what defines what is a baby, because you can't just say I had a miscarriage at like 6 weeks and therefore I finished my iddah. No, we need to be sure about that. So what defines the baby, or what considers like that you've given birth, is that you give birth to something, like you give birth to like a fetus that has the signs of a human being. Like it should have legs, arms, formation. That you can say that, like, and that would be only really, but at least over 90 days, if not more. At least over 90 days. So if it's between 90 and 100 days, you really should look at it and see if it has formation. Because if it doesn't, then you can't consider that your iddah's over. Okay, that's the main things I want to speak about with relation to what you can't do, or what you need to pay attention to, and also what to do if like you happen to be pregnant when that happened. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with the woman, for example, having gatherings in her house with her sisters, having visitors to come over and see her. But again, it shouldn't be non-mahrams. I mean, we're not supposed to mix with non-mahram men anyway, but especially when she's in mourning, she shouldn't be mixing, because what's the difference between that and going out in the street? Yeah, so I think you can ask questions now. I think I've gone through everything what I wanted to mainly speak about. And like I said as well, I did mention that if you've done the contract, that you still have to observe this iddah. Yes, ask your questions, inshallah. As soon as he dies, it starts from then, even if she didn't know. Even if she did not know. Pardon? No, of course she can come she can come to the mosque and pray for him and those things. Like, yeah, it's necessary. Like, look, it's, as I said to you, let's just make that very clear. You're allowed to go out for your needs. It's not a tight thing where it can only be absolute necessity. Like, absolute necessity is like you've got to rush with the ambulance to the doctor. It's not to that level. Okay, so when you've got a need, you need to go out. You just, for whatever that reason is, it's just a need. It's not like just like, oh, let's go hang around the shops. Let's go have Gloria Jean's, go have coffee. Pardon? Yeah. So let's, yeah. Okay. So look, this is what it is. First of all, I just want to mention something you just mentioned, because it's very important. From the moment he passes away, the iddah starts from then, even if she didn't know. So if she didn't find out till 4 months and 10 days later, her iddah's over. Okay, just so you understand. So it's not from the time you hear it that you have to count 4 months and 10 days from that. It's important for you to know that, okay? But as for just say you're overseas, you should return if you're able to. It's not, as much as possible, you should go back to your husband's home and observe your iddah in your husband's home. That's the whole point.
Oh, so you shouldn't leave your...
Doesn't matter. Even if you're 100.
But you're not going to be pregnant when he
It doesn't matter. As I said to you, it's not only related to being pregnant. It's an act of worship. Oh, you missed the beginning. Did you miss the beginning of the talk? Okay. Remember, it's an act of worship. It's a number of things. It's an act of worship. It's out of honouring the sanctity of the marital contract, a way of showing that you were grateful for the blessing of marriage. And it's a whole lot of different things, depending on the situation. It could be the combination of all those things, or if someone didn't have a very happy marriage, it's still an act of worship. Okay? All the money that belongs to your husband is part of the inheritance. That's why. That's right. That's right. You've got your own money. You've got a family that supports you. Like, that's where family, like, see, in Islam, it's not just upon the husband to support his wife. If a woman doesn't have a husband, then it now goes to the males in the family, right? Father, brother, do you understand? Son. Like, especially the males, it's much more a responsibility. But if not, then it's khalas, yani, you go get a job. You go get work.
So you're doing the 4 months.
Yeah, although I just said to you, you're allowed to go out to work. You're allowed to go out. You could work in your home, or you could go out to work if you have to. That's in a desperate situation. But inshallah, like usually, people you find come together, Allah gives rizq. Not only that, sometimes you might find your husband passes away, the community comes together, they bring money over. Yani,
He's so much khair in the community, and
yeah.
And the community actually bought a house for the wife.
They see what I'm trying to say? You see what I'm trying to say?
Because this man did so much khair.
Yeah, that's right.
Allah looked after his family.
That's right.
It's amazing.
And this is why, sisters, wallahi, this is why. This is part of the blessing of always staying with the community. When you've always stayed with the community, you get so much blessings from that. Wallahi, I have seen so many blessings in my home and in my family, all because of, alhamdulillah, always staying with the Jamaal of the Muslims. Don't just go off and live somewhere far away. No one knows anything about you, and you don't mix with the community. No one, don't do that. You understand? If you're always praying with the Muslims, fasting with the Muslims, Taraweeh, lessons, people know about you, subhanAllah. And you'll find them there, inshallah. You understand, sisters?
So the nafaqah stops, his nafaqah stops the minute he dies?
That's right. You can't stay, because like I said, the reason you've got to understand is that wealth that belongs to your husband is now not his wealth anymore. It belongs to his inheritors. That's why. Okay, so you're taking from the haqq of someone else now. It's not just, like, of course you're going to have inheritance, but you need to get divided. You'll get your division. Maybe you can spend from the inheritance, part of that inheritance you can most likely spend on your rent for the next few months. Okay? And look, you'll find, don't worry, Allah razaq, Allah will look after you, you understand? But also, I want to just add, which is important, and this is something I've been discussing with some other, female teachers, that we as women should not be so dependent on our husbands. We should be looking for means to earn our own incomes. You understand? Like, it's fine to rely on your husband for income, but you should have a long-term ideas about how you're going to support yourself, because things can go wrong. I advise every woman, go get an education or go learn a skill that you can do to earn money. This is something encouraged in Islam anyway. Like, even the wives of the Prophet, many of them they used to actually make things with their hands and sell it and earn money, because not only that, you can do sadaqah from your money. There's such khair that you can do. Invest your money, sisters, as well. Like, don't just, get the idea that, we don't have anything to do with money. No. Okay, so think about ways that you can earn money and make money.
But isn't it not recommended for a woman to work in Islam?
There's nothing wrong with a woman, especially working in her house. And if her husband allows her, there's nothing wrong with it. And if she wrote it on her contract, he can't stop her. If she wrote on her contract that I want to work when I get married, he can't stop her, according to, especially the Hanbali scholars, they say that is a condition he must abide by. Okay, so they've agreed upon that before marriage. If not, she can negotiate. If her husband allows her to work, she can work as long as he allows her to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
I'm a primary teacher.
Yes.
So if my husband or he passes away, can I go start work? I'm not working at the moment.
Yep, that's it. If you need to. If you need to. Don't do it if you don't need to. But if you find, I have to pay the rent, go. Or if you're scared that you might run out of money but before the end of the iddah, go start applying for jobs.
So what if the husband leaves some money for me? So
yes.
am I allowed to use that money after
No, don't say that, sisters. Don't say no. You can't take any of his money unless he's gifted it to you.
No, like if he says that, okay, I have kept this money for you to use when I'm not there, like when I die.
You can't do that. You actually can't do that. You can't do that. He can give it to you when he's alive. He can give you as a gift now. Like you've got your mahr as well. Like if he owes you a mahr, he might owe you a mahr. That will be also another thing. Like you have mu'akhar, right? You might have mu'akhar. That's yours. So that could be used to support yourself.
Him to save some money for me as well. No.
Look, whatever money he saves and he hasn't passed it over to you, that now belongs to the inheritors.
Okay.
All that money that he,
what if he thinks that, okay, I'm saving this money for my wife?
Okay, let me explain something. You need to understand something. We're not allowed to give wasiyah, which that's what you're talking about. That's wasiyah to any inheritor. So you can't even do that for your mum, your dad. No, because they have a natural, like Allah has stipulated a fixed share of inheritance for them. So anyone who has a fixed share of inheritance, it's not allowed to do wasiyah for them. Wasiyah is only for those who do not inherit naturally. That's why you cannot do that. That mu'akhar is your debt. So that before the inheritance can be divided, before the inheritance is divided, that is yours. And I wouldn't forgive that because you need it. Okay?